the brand new targeted investigation that is set to debut later tonight right here on News 8 and on Wood TV. Plus, back in the 90s, over a dozen women were killed or they disappeared near Division Street right here in Grand Rapids. We brought you a targeted investigation back in 2023 related to those crimes. And now, just 2 years later, in 2025, the man who was convicted for some of those killings is confessing a lot more. Susan Sample stopped by the digital studio to talk about her latest targeted investigation that is airing tonight. It is titled Dead Man Talking. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. Always appreciate the time, when you guys have a few minutes over at Target 8 to talk about some of the exciting specials that you guys are working on.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, and this special in particular that's airing on Thursday, it's titled Dead Man Talking, the Confession Tapes. And Susan, this is really sort of a follow-up to a special you did a few years ago about the 17 women who were murdered along Division Street in Grand Rapids back in the day.
That's right. We've been continuing to research this for the past 2 years since the last special that we did a couple years ago. And actually, even what you just said, you said 17 women. One of the things that we found in the past 2 years is that it's actually 16, because one of the women that I thought were included in this string, this series of murders, actually went missing in the late 80s. And the suspected serial killer did not arrive in Grand Rapids until June of 92. So it's now 16 missing and murdered women who disappeared over 3 years between late 1993 and late 1996. So it's 16 missing and murdered women. And the purpose of this special tomorrow is to go over Garry Artman's confession, which to my knowledge has not been aired. I have the audio of his confession, which was nearly 4 hours long. It was a deathbed confession. I should back up here a little bit, right? So the women most of them were sex workers on Division Avenue, and they vanished from Division Avenue over that 3-year period. As I mentioned, there were no arrests in those cases. 12 of the women were found murdered. Their bodies were around Grand Rapids. There was one in Ottawa County. There was one in the city of Muskegon, but the others were in Grand Rapids or Kent County. They were in the woods. They were in brush. And there were 4 additional women who vanished and have never been seen again. There were no arrests in those cases, despite a task force and a lot of man hours and a lot of work from police trying to figure out who was doing this, until 2022, when the Kent County Sheriff's Office spearheaded genetic genealogy in the murder of Sharon Hammock, a 29-year-old mother who was found murdered on the side of 76th Street down in the Caledonia Township area. They took the killer's DNA, which was on the blanket that she was wrapped up in, and also under her fingernails and her body, and used that and went to genetic genealogy and publicly available databases online. They built the killer's family tree in reverse, and they narrowed it down to one of 4 sons of Wilfred and Donna Artman, who most recently, they're both deceased now, but they had been in Port Huron. And they were able to determine, the Kent County Sheriff's Office, through further investigation, which is what they do. They consider those a tip, a lead. They then narrow it down and say, oh, there was only one of these 4 sons who was actually in Grand Rapids and actually has a history of sexual assault. And in fact, Garry Dean Artman served 11 years in prison for raping 2 teenagers at knife point. He got out of prison in June of 92. And I'm not sure why he ended up in Grand Rapids, but he ended up moving into the Herkimer Hotel, which is right smack dab in the heart of the city, and also in the heart of what was then the city's red light district. This doesn't happen as often anymore, but back in 95, when I first started working here, there was a 3, 4, 5 mile stretch of Division Avenue roughly from Wealthy South to 28th Street, but mostly Wealthy South to Burton, where women who were working in the sex industry would be on the corners. And that's where they vanished from, presumably, and we know now. They were picked up and then murdered and dumped in isolated areas. So Garry Artman is arrested He's an over-the-road trucker. He was living in Grand Rapids in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s, perhaps up until 2012, but mostly he was an over-the-road trucker. I think at one point he said he covered 2.5 million miles across the country in his big rig. So he was convicted of the Sharon Hammock murder. The whole time he was saying, I didn't do it. He's incredibly crass in that he would say, yes, I had sex with however many women, but I never hurt any of them. But he spoke about them in a really horrific way. He was convicted, but again, he said, I never hurt anyone. I never hurt anyone. I was just a customer. Until less than 2 months after his conviction, the Kent County Sheriff's Office, Detective Lieutenant Andy Hines and Detective Paul Van Ree, who did excellent work, received a message that Artman wanted to talk about, quote, bodies. That's how it was said to them. They got a message from the prison in Jackson where he was serving time. And he was on his deathbed. He was suffering from cancer at the time and decided that he wanted to talk about bodies, which he said he had not. I mean, he even cussed out detectives in the trial at the end during the sentencing. He called them expletive idiots. So no one thought this guy was going to suddenly say, I want to talk. In fact, I think the detectives, while they were infinitely hopeful, including Detective Case Weston of Grand Rapids Police, they kind of were like, we'll see it, we'll believe it when we see it. They rushed down there to the hospital. He was at Henry Ford Hospital in Jackson. There were some hiccups and stuff because he had a lot of medical stuff going on, but ultimately they did a nearly 4-hour interview with him over several sessions over 2 days. He wanted a Subway sandwich and a Dr. Pepper for it. He also wanted assurances that he would not be extradited to the state of Maryland to face trial there because he was charged with murdering 25-year-old Dusty Shuck in Maryland. She was found on the side of I-70. I think she had been stabbed and beaten. She was beautiful woman who just lovely inside and out, her mom says, Lori Kreitzer. And she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in her maybe early 20s. And it was a real struggle to get her to stay in treatment. For whatever reason, her mom tried that a lot, but she would leave treatment and wander hitching rides across country. So the belief was, and it was connected by DNA, ultimately, to Garry Artman. They determined that sometime around 2008, they actually, through CODIS, the federal database that has DNA, they had a match between Sharon Hammock and Dusty Shuck. They didn't know who killed the two women, but they knew it was the same person. So when Kent County arrested Artman, they said, hey, Maryland State Police, we got the guy. And so Maryland State Police charged him with Dusty Shuck. He didn't want to go there. He didn't want to go to Maryland. Maybe he thought he had more time than he actually did and was afraid that he was going to be removed from Kent County where he had a cell to himself. That's what he wanted. So Phil, I could talk about this longer.
Right. I can imagine. Well, and I appreciate you kind of going through all the different avenues about this story because there is a lot to this story. And I'm sure that, you kind of remember covering it when it was happening at the time. And then you put in a ton of effort into that 2023 target investigation. And here we are again in 2025. It's kind of that same story. I want to go back to something you said, though, about when Garry Artman, the focal point of this latest Target 8 special for Thursday night, when he told authorities that he wanted to talk and kind of make some confessions. And all the law enforcement officials were kind of in the same boat of like, well, he's said things in the past. We don't know what's going to happen this time. I mean, are you surprised that he eventually did kind of do these interviews with the Kent County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, at the time, yes. When I heard or someone texted me and said, hey, he might be talking, yeah, I was surprised. And then they went down there and initially they could not talk to him and he went into surgery. And when he got out, he did not regain consciousness and he was on a ventilator. Right. And they didn't know if he was ever going to wake up. So the fact that he did wake up, in fact, Dusty Shuck's mom called that a miracle. She said, this is miraculous that this guy awakened and was able to speak and confessed to murdering Dusty.
Right. Well, and the hook, obviously, for this target date investigation is the fact that we are going to be hearing from those confession tapes. Probably, for most of us, this is going to be the first time we've heard anything, maybe even the first time we've heard Artman's voice. And I mean, just kind of thinking about putting together this piece and going through all of those confession tapes, going through and reliving everything that you've already done for past specials and past stories and everything like that. I mean, if you wouldn't mind kind of just peeling back the curtain a little bit from a reporter standpoint, I mean, what was that like? How were you able to, again, kind of do all that and go through this very serious, very sad story once again for another target date investigation?
Initially, I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for the video and audio or whatever I could get of this deathbed confession, and it was denied initially. And the Kent County Sheriff's Office said, I think they cited the body-worn camera Privacy Act. So body-worn camera in a private location is not subject to FOIA or is exempt from FOIA, and they were arguing or saying that it was in a hospital room. So I appealed to, so it was private. So I appealed to the county commission, which is the process and how you did that. And I appealed to the county commission and said, I don't think that a dead, admitted serial killer has rights to privacy, even in a hospital room. I think the public interest in knowing what he said outweighs, and the county commission agreed. So what they ended up doing is really ordering the release of audio only. So we don't see him because he was in a medical, it was difficult to interview him because he was whispering, hoarse, raspy, and had to stop often to cough and for medical intervention. He ultimately, he died of lung cancer. Did I say that he died 2 weeks after the confession? I can't remember if I already said that.
Right.
So that's how I got it. And then listening to it, I listened to it a lot. It was disturbing to listen to. But I wanted to make sure that, and also hard to understand, kind of confusing. And it was hard to know whether he was confused or if he just, it's hard to know what was going on. And detectives will say again and again, we can't speculate.
Right.
But I would listen to it just doing my daily, just going about my life. Like when I was on the beach or I was walking on the beach, I had it and I would just have it in my ear and I was just listening to it over and over, just so that I could try, I picked up things that I would not have if I just tried to race through.
Right.
It took a long time. This whole process has taken a long time. It was 2 years ago that I did that initial hour-long special, and the purpose of that was more to, well, this is the purpose of this one too, is to recognize and pay tribute to the women. That's the purpose of this, because Sharon Hammock's family at the time, prior to this deathbed confession, was the only family that had any answers at all or any semblance of justice, if that's what you can call it, because he was convicted and died 3 months later. But all of these other families, 15 families of missing and murdered women, they're like, did he murder my loved one? Or was it someone else? Is the killer still walking around? Are we ever going to know? So that's the purpose of this, is just to try to answer some of those questions.
Right. And I think that is something that I'm sure you hope people kind of take away from this, is more so just looking back on these victims and how these deaths and disappearances really impacted these families and really the greater West Michigan community as well. Despite these confessions, despite this story, though, I know the story's not done yet. There's still a lot to be discussed with this, Susan. And again, we really appreciate you stopping by here to talk about this special, but I think we appreciate you a whole lot more for being able to put together these target date investigations for us to check out and just keep us informed. So again, want to thank you for doing that. We're very much looking forward to Thursday night.
Thank you, Phil. And I want to thank Wood TV 8, by the way, and Nexstar for giving me the time to do this. It would not have been possible. And this is not stuff that more and more in journalism, these are not the kinds of things that you're able to do. I am grateful that Wood TV and Nexstar gave me the opportunity and the time to do this.
Yes.
So thanks to them.
And we're grateful to have somebody as talented as you to put these together. So thank you again,
Can I say
Susan.
too, shout out to the police agencies, because all of the police agencies have been helpful. Initially the legal side of it, they denied the FOIA, the Freedom of Information request. But outside of that, that was a legal thing. Police agencies, Walker PD, Muskegon PD, Ottawa County Sheriff's Department, Kent County Sheriff's Department, Grand Rapids Police Department. They have all been very responsive to me.
Yes, no, glad to
Thanks,
hear that
Phil.
as well. Yes, no, thank you so much, Susan. We really appreciate it.